Okay, so Bezrat Hashem, tonight we're picking up from the beginning of Perek Kaf Bet, chapter 22. And when we last left off, it was determined that Shaul was trying to kill David, and David had to run away. He went to Nov, the city of Kohanim, where Achimelech, the Kohen Gadol, assisted him. He told the Kohen that he was on the mission for the king. David did not want to slander about Shaul. He also didn't want to reveal anything. So he said, I'm on a secret mission for the king Shaul. Can you please give me bread? And he insisted he'd give him bread. And there was an emergency. He could even eat sacred bread, which might have been the lechem apanim, the Shabbos showbread, which indicates that it was likely Shabbos on the day that he arrived. So David was on an urgent mission, and he gets fed by the Kohen Gadol, Achimelech. The problem is that someone was listening and watching, and that someone was Doeg HaAdomi, Doeg the Edomite, whose name was Edomite because he apparently resided in the land of Edom. However, tonight we're going to discover another reason why he's referred to as an Edomite. Edomite is, of course, referring to the people of Esav, the great enemy and nemesis of the Jews, eternally. So David then flees from Nov. He can't stay in one place for too long. The king wants to kill him. That means he's now just a fugitive indefinitely until something is settled. So he gets food and the sword of Goliath, and then he runs to the cave of Adullam. That's where chapter 22 picks up. Vayelech David Misham. He leaves the city of Nov, which is where the Mishkan was. Vaymalet el Ma'arat Adullam. And he flees to the cave of Adullam. Adullam's cave is in the region of Yehuda. It's in the region of, excuse me, I skipped one step, right? He first runs to the Philistine city of Gat. He leaves from the city of Nov to Gat, which was a Plishti city. Over there, they say, wait a minute, isn't that the guy who was our number one enemy because he killed Goliath, our hero? And David has to pretend that he's insane. And we said at that point that he composed Tehillim number 34, which is an incredible thing. And then he flees, like barely escapes, and he flees to the cave of Adullam. Adullam is now further south in the territory of Yehuda. And you recall, David is from Beit Lechem, which is Yehuda. He's from the tribe of Judah as well. So he's run back to his own tribe's territory. And here the most fascinating thing occurs. Vayishme'u echav v'chol beit aviv. In David's hometown, they know, right? So the tribe of Yehuda, they know when he's around, they can pick up on it. So they hear that David's around. Vayerdu elav shama, and they all go down to David. Right? So he's trying to hide, but he gets discovered by his loving family and brethren, and they go down to see him. Vaytkaptzu elav kol ish matzok, and many people started gathering around him. Kol ish matzok, which means people who are in distress. V'chol ish asher lo noshe, and anybody who's in debt, who has creditors chasing him down. V'chol ish mar nefesh, anybody who has a bitter spirit. Vayihi alehem lesar, and David in his cave in hiding becomes a leader to these distressed and pained people. And about 400 men gather with David, and they become like his posse. He becomes their leader. These distraught and these broken people who have fallen on hard times. An incredibly fascinating image, a fascinating snapshot of David and Melech's life. David at this point is the lowest state. He's being chased for his life. Going from place to place, has to act like an insane person. He's begging for bread. He has to be possibly Mechal Shabbos to travel to save his life, to eat kachim, which are forbidden to him generally, but since his life is in danger, he's allowed. He's in an extremely low state. And it's in this state that he starts attracting all kinds of lowly people, and he becomes their leader. What a testament to the type of person David was throughout the Jewish people's history. Ramalakovsky and I were just discussing it this week, and he has a further perspective than I do. And he said, throughout the Jewish people's history, you always find that the leaders of the Jewish people, the ones that naturally are pushed to the foreground, the leaders of the Jews are always, incidentally, they're always taking care of the low and the destitute people, the widow, the orphan, those who have no other support system. You'll find that they're taken care of by the leaders of the Jewish people. One of my favorite stories, I don't know if I shared it. Please interrupt me if I did. I don't want to repeat myself. Rav Chaim Ozer Grudinsky, an absolute genius who lived in the early 1900s in Eastern Europe. He was an absolute genius. They say about him, they have eyewitnesses, he could write 2 different halachic responsa with 2 different hands at the exact same time while speaking to somebody about a different topic. A brilliant, brilliant mind, extremely talented, extremely and prolific. He was writing responsa around the world. So he was a great Torah scholar, a great genius, and he was the leader of the generation. And if you walked into his home, it would look like a public thoroughfare. He had mail coming to his house for other people. It was like a complete, it's like a train station. People just set up shop over there. He was feeding people. He basically adopted the whole town as his family. Anybody who needed a place to sleep or to eat or to come to or just needed chizuk, they would come to Rav Chaim Ozer Grudinsky. An absolute astounding example, like similar to David HaMelech here. Once there was a journalist who came to visit Rav Chaim Ozer. She heard about this great leader of the Jewish people, and she came to visit and just like see, and she was so taken aback, he or she, I don't know, but the journalist was so taken aback by the scene. They couldn't believe it, like such overwhelming kindness, such overwhelming chesed that the rabbi was engaged in, that the journalist said to Rabbi Chaim Ozer, she said, I'm overwhelmed by how much you do for other people. Please, I'd like to do you a personal favor. Is there anything I can do for you? I live in the big city, and I know that there's certain goods that I have access to that you don't. So is there anything I can bring you from the big city that I'd like to do you a personal favor? So he stopped and he thought, and he said, yeah, you know what? There's actually a personal favor that I can benefit from. He said, there's a lady that helps my wife around the house with cleaning and cooking, and she has very large feet. And it's very difficult to find shoes for her in our small town. There's not shoemakers that make that kind of size of shoe. And she needs new shoes. Can you please, from the big city, can you please bring me shoes that would fit her? Yeah. Through and through. He had expanded his definition of self to include everybody, even the lady who helped his wife. And this was to him considered a personal favor. It is a remarkable story. I heard that from Rav Shagi Neuberger. Remarkable story about a remarkable person. And here we have the father of remarkable people, David HaMelech. The Mashiach himself is hiding in a cave, and joining him are about 400 people who are low, destitute, downtrodden, and he becomes their leader, gives them chizuk, etc. It says here, anybody who has a creditor chasing him down. I just wanted to stop on that line for a moment, diverge from our story. It is a mitzvah to give a loan to a Jew. If you have a fellow in need, it's a mitzvah to give him a loan. However, if that's only if there's a reasonable way for him to pay back. If a completely impoverished person with no job comes and says, can I borrow $1,000? There's no obligation for you to lend $1,000 because there's no reasonable way to expect that it will return. Right? A loan is not tzedakah. So somebody who has creditors, you have people who are coming to collect, there's somebody who assuming they took loans from Jews, that means that they had a means of paying back, but now they've fallen on hard times and they're not able to pay back the loan. At that point, it is forbidden to press the person who's in debt if you know that he doesn't have the ability to pay back. If someone owes you money, you did the mitzvah of loaning him money, you thought he would be able to pay back. And now it's time for him to pay up, but you know that he has no ability to pay you back. You know that he doesn't have the money. It's forbidden. You cannot be like a creditor at the compounding on his door. Hey, where's my money? If you know that he can't pay back, it's forbidden actually to ask him for money. But these people were, alas, they were suffering from this issue, and they came to David to seek respite and chizuk. Okay, so here's David in the cave in the territory of Judah. The problem is he has to stay on the run, and now he's especially in danger because his whole family knows where he is, and that makes his whole family in danger. anybody who supports David can be considered rebelling against the king, treason, and worthy of the death penalty. So now David is concerned not only for his own life, but for the life of his brothers and his parents. So he has to continue running away. So this is verse number 3. Vayelech David misham mitzpei Moav. David again, like he did earlier by going to the Plishtim, he now goes to Mitzpeh Moav, a place in Moab, which is across. He's now crossed the Jordan, or he went, I guess, through the Dead Sea. He's gone east to the land of Jordan. Yeah, that's where Moab was, on the outskirts of the Transjordan territory. That's where the land of Moab was, and David's gone there. Now, if you've already tried going to enemy territory and it was awful, why are you trying again? So there's a distinction. The first time he went to God, that was the Plishtim, and he was a personal enemy. He had defeated their champion. However, the Moabites, although they're not friends of the Jews, but there's not a specific issue that they had with David HaMelech, and therefore it was a little bit safer.
Did he go with the 400?
Did he go with the 400? Good question. It seems. Did he go with the 400? That's a good question. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. Additionally, it's possible that he went to Moab. Perhaps he is, after all, a descendant of Ruth, who came from Moab. Perhaps he hoped they would be a little bit more merciful since his ancestors were from their people. And not only was she a Moabite, she was a princess, a Moabite princess. She was a prestigious Moabite. Yeah, which could either be a good thing or an awful thing, right? Because she then betrayed her people. But so in any event, he goes to Moab, and he goes with his family. I don't know if he took all 400, but he did go with his family, because he says to the king of Moab, please let my father and mother stay with you until I know what God will do for me. Meaning David is saying about himself, I have to incessantly stay on the run. I don't know when this is going to stop. I can't park in one place for too long. How tragic. But my parents, they're old, they're elderly. Yishai was extremely old. There's a midrash I recall. I wonder if our school brings it. Jesse, David's father, was extremely old. I just don't know how old he was. So they couldn't continue running with him. And he says to the king of Moab, please take care of my parents. At least can you do this for me? Until I know what God will do for me, which is beautiful. He's talking to the Moabite king, and he's not bashful to mention the name of God. This is the David HaMelech who's composing Tehillim in the cave, who's composing Tehillim while he's going crazy. Right? David always has God on his mind and on his lips. So he escorted his parents to the king of Moab, and they stayed with him. David's parents stayed with the king of Moab all the days that David was around. Vayomer Gad Hanavi El David. Suddenly, David is approached by God. G-A-D. He was the name of one of the prophets in that era. Shmuel Hanavi was the leading prophet, but God was a different prophet. And he approaches David, and he says, Lo tishev b'mtzudah. Do not stay here amongst the Moabite. Lech uvata lecha Eretz Yehuda. Go back to Judah, where you came from. Right? Go back west to the territory of Yehuda. Vayelech David vayavo Yar Charet. And so David comes to a place called the forest of Charet, and he leaves his parents behind in Moab, trusting that the king Moab will take care of them as he did while David was there. Vayishma Shaul ki noda David v'anashim asher ito. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's at this point. I apologize for the delay. At this point, excuse me, it's not in the actual text. But from verse number 4, an extremely tragic incident can be extrapolated. As long as David was in the fortress of Moab, Moab took care of his parents. As soon as David left, the prophet comes and tells David to leave. As soon as he leaves, they are no longer going to take care of his family. And the Midrash inserts here that they murdered all of David's family except for one brother. An extremely tragic thing. This is extracted from the lines, the end of verse number 4, all the days that David was in the fortress. That means that once David left the fortress, they no longer sat with the king of Moab because they had been murdered. The Midrash tells us we have a tradition. This is so, so tragic. David, yes, the brother who, you can imagine there was already history of a little bit of disappointment between him and his brothers. They thought they were going to be the king. He's called from the field. He becomes the king. Now his whole family has to go into hiding because of him. He leaves and the whole family is murdered except for one brother, including Yishai and his wife. Yeah. So now God says to David, leave and go back to your people, and go back to the land of Yehuda. So he comes to the place called Yarcharit. And now comes another extremely tragic event. This is a chapter full of heartbreak, unfortunately. By Shema Shaul Kinoda David, Shaul hears that David is hiding in Yehuda. Saul was sitting in Giva, which is the place where he lived in the territory of Binyamin, and all of his servants were around him. There's an interesting issue here. It says that Shaul was in the Giva, Tachata Eshel Barama, underneath the tree in Ramah. Ramah is the place where Shmuel is from. Giva is the place where Shaul is from. And we're combining both places. Shaul was in Giva, in the Ramah. Which one was he in? Was he in the town of Shmuel? Was he in the town of Shaul? So one resolution is to say that Ramah is not referring to the one that we know about. There's a different place called Ramah, which is where the Giva is. It's one and the same. However, Chazal here inserts something so fascinating. They say that Shaul was only alive in the merit of Ramah, which is Shmuel, lived in the Ramah, and it's only because Shmuel was davening, praying for Shaul's life on a regular basis, that Shaul was even alive in the Giva. Yes, the way the Chazal read it is, in English, I'll plug it in. So Saul was sitting in the Giva, meaning in the merit of what was happening under the tree in Ramah. What was happening in the tree in Ramah? Shmuel, the Hanavi, the prophet, was davening for him. We see from here once again the connection that Shmuel felt to the king, Shaul. Shmuel was the one who anointed him. And on the night he found out that Shaul was not going to be the king anymore, he cried all night. Right? He was extremely embittered and he cried all night and he called out all night. And even after Shmuel knows that Shaul cannot be the king anymore, he still prays for him. Help. He's asking Hashem to give him life and the ability to do teshuvah and repent and fix whatever it is he did wrong. And in that merit, Shaul kept living. Unfortunately, it did not turn out well. Okay, Shaul is sitting there with his servants and he hears that David is in hiding. So now we have this tragic snapshot of jealousy. He says to his servants, Shimuna bnei Yimini, listen, you sons of Benjaminites. He's speaking to them in a disparaging way. What is the son of Jesse going to make you rich that you're conspiring against me? Is he going to make you all prestigious leaders? You've all tied yourselves together against me. Yeah, it's like an insane person. And even my own son made a covenant with David. What a disgrace. And nobody told me about it. It must be you're all conspiring against me. You all hate me. You all choose David over me. Nobody tells me any of this news. My son made my enemy stand against me in ambush. So we step back, we appreciate how absurd this is. Shaul, who is literally hunting down David and trying to murder him, is saying that his slaves are conspiring against him. Right? He's the only one being violent here, but jealousy can blind a person to such an extent that he'll call everybody else conspirers, he'll call everybody else violent and betrayal. He'll accuse them of betrayal. So nobody speaks up. He speaks to all of his servants, and nobody speaks up. Vayan doeg ha'adumi. And here comes the fateful moment. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Fox. You're muted, though. Just make sure to unmute. Did you raise your hand?
Yes.
Yeah.
The Gad the prophet, when he
Yeah.
said to David, get out of here. Could that have been an indication that the king was going to kill the whole family? And the
Like
prophet,
that Gad was trying to tell them, take your whole family out of here. Is that what you're saying?
well, or whatever he sensed that David was in danger just by living
Oh,
with the
interesting. Meaning to say the timing kind of works out. David leaves and suddenly everyone's killed.
right,
So he's saying it sounds like the Gad had just saved him in the nick of time.
right,
That's an interesting take on it. The Chazal that tell us that everyone was killed, they say that the reason it happened is because David left. It's David. It wasn't just good timing. It was David's leaving that was the cause of the murder,
okay,
because they were only protecting the family as long as David was present. Perhaps they felt some reverence for him or a fear of him. They heard that he was a strong warrior. But once he left and he was out of the picture, they said, "Okay, these filthy Jews, we can get rid of them." Yeah, but it's interesting, right? I can imagine people perceived it as that. Very nice.
good, thank you.
Good. So comes Doeg HaAdomi, Doeg the Adomite, who was on the Sanhedrin. He was an extremely prominent scholar, one of the Torah leaders of the Jewish people. But alas, he's got the dagger tongue. And he says as follows, Vayan Doeg HaAdomi, this is verse number 9. Who nitzav alavdei Shaul vayomar. He says, I saw David come to the city of Nov, to Achimelech ben Achituf. He was schmoozing with the Kohen Gadol Achimelech. And Vaishalo Bashem, Achimelech did an inquiry on the Urim V'Tumim, and he gave him food, and he even gave him the sword of Goliath. He gave him food and a weapon, and he also inquired on the Urim V'Tumim. If you recall last time, the inquiry of Achimelech was, should I help David or not? But Doeg is just saying just enough to absolutely incense Shaul and turn him against the Kohen. The Kohen had helped David with the understanding that David was on a mission for the king. So the Kohen was actually being loyal to Saul by helping David. Here's a person who I know to be somebody who's close to the king, and he's asking me for help because he's on a mission for the king. So of course I'll give him food and a weapon. I'll ask the Urim V'Tumim to double check. And that's a request on behalf of the king himself. Like, should I help David or not? And here Doeg is twisting everything. In the context of Shaul accusing everyone of helping his enemy David, Doeg says, you know who else helped him? Achimelech the Kohen helped, which is absolute slander, right? This is the way of somebody who is slanderous. He spreads only a little bit of information without giving the context. And instead of the truth, which is Achimelech was actually being loyal to Saul, he's making it seem as if he's conspiring against Saul and helping Saul's enemy. And the reason he mentions asking the Urim V'Tumim, Rashi points out, is because the halacha is that the Kohen Gadol may only seek the advice of the Urim V'Tumim if it has to do with the king, if it relates to the king. I mean, in the previous time we saw when Eli consulted the Urim V'Tumim, there was no king around. This time, there's already a king in existence. The Kohen Gadol has to be working together with the king or asking on behalf of the king. So by Achimelech asking the Urim V'Tumim for David, it implies that Achimelech held that David was the king. That's what Doeg was trying to relate. That this is real treason over here. Achimelech was treating your enemy as if he was the king, which is trying to usurp the throne, and that's a full-scale rebellion. and you should definitely do something about this. So he's really, really ruffling the feathers here, and he's about to cause a complete disaster. So Shaul immediately sends for the Kohen, and not only does he request the presence of the Kohen, but Kol Beit Aviva Kohanim Asher Benov, the entire Beit Av, that entire family of Kohanim, which lived in Nov. Nov again was a city where the Mishkan was, and the city was primarily inhabited by Kohanim. And they all come to the king. Yeah, imagine what it looked like. They were bringing sacrifices in the middle of the Mishkan. Suddenly, a messenger from the king. Everyone pack out. We all have to go to Shul, and they all travel. They all travel towards Shul. Yeah. Vayomer Shaul Shmana ben Achituv. Listen up. Listen here, the son of Achituv. Throughout this narrative, we see that whenever someone's being disparaging, they don't use the name of the person. They'll refer to him as son of so and so. Son of so and so. Which is, by the way, how Kalev, right, got the Jews to listen to him when the spies came back. I'm just inserting this here. He said, "You want to hear what Ben Amram did to us?" Referring to Moshe as Ben Amram, right? As if he was going to disparage him. And then he said, "Oh, he gave us the man and he took us out of Egypt, etc." Moshe, you wanted to say something?
That that spills over into modern English usage also,
Yeah.
referring to someone who you would normally be on first name terms with a last name.
Oh, a last name. Okay, I thought you were saying like son of a gun.
No, referring
Very good.
to if someone who you're normally on first name terms with, and then you get all formal with them, less Mister or whatever, that shows that you're upset.
Very nice. Yeah, it does transfer over. Nice. So he says, "Listen here, Ben Achituv," referring to the Kohen. Vayomer hineni adoni. And the Kohen is shocked here. He says, "Hineni" means like I'm at your service, my master. He has no idea why he's in trouble. As far as he knows, he's going to be rewarded, right? He just helped the king's servant who was on a secret mission for him. And he said, so Shaul says to him, "Lama keshartem alai? Why did you organize yourselves against me? You and Ben Yishai, when you gave him food and a weapon, and you even asked the Urim Tumim on his behalf, as if he's the king. You're trying to arise against me, to ambush me. It's as clear as this day." That's when it says kayom hazeh, it means it's as clear as day that you're conspiring against me. Right? Shaul is convinced that the world is against him. Vayan Achimelech et Hamelech. Achimelech responds to the king and he says to him, "Mi b'chol avadecha keDavid ne'eman." Who amongst your servants is as faithful as David? And he's your son-in-law. And he's always listening to what you have to say, and he's honored in your own household. Like, David's your enemy? I don't understand what you're saying. Right? This is all Chinese to Achimelech. He's not in the loop here. He's not living around the king's palace where he knows that the king has it out for David. As far as Achimelech knows, David's like, the greatest guy in the kingdom. Hayom achiloti lish'ol lo be'elohim chalilali. Please don't hold anything against me. God forbid that I did anything against you. I don't know a small thing or a great thing about any of this drama happening between you and David. I knew nothing of the friction. I thought there was a midrash here. I don't know anything of the small or the big. I don't know anything. Like, I'm completely clueless about this animosity that you both have. Shaul is not swayed. And he says to him in verse number 16, Mot tamut Achimelech. Now he says his first name, but it's because he's decreeing death upon him. You shall surely die, Achimelech. Ata, you, b'chol beit avicha, and your entire father's house, which means basically the entire city of Nov. Vayomer melech laratzim anitzavim alav. So the king says to the footmen who are standing about, Sobu v'amitu kohanei Hashem. Turn and strike and kill these Kohanim. Kigam yadam im David, because they're together with David. And they knew that he was running away, and they didn't tell me. And look at this now. Shaul's support system starts backing away. ולא אבו עבדי המלך לשלוח את ידם לפגוע בכהני השם. The king's servants did not, no way. They said, we're not killing the Cohen and we're not killing his family. Vayomer Melech ledoyeg, it's spelled doyeg, but it's doeg, ledoeg, sovatav gabakonim. So the king, not finding any of his servants to help him execute the Cohen and the Kohanim, he turns to Doeg, the one who shared the negative news, and he says, you do it. And without even a pasuk, in the very same pasuk, Vaisov Doeg, Vaifgahu Bakohanim. And Doeg the Adomi, Vaisov Doeg HaAdomi, Vaifgahu Bakohanim, Vayamet Bayamahu Shmonim V'chamisha Ish Nosei Ephod Bad. On that day, Doeg killed 85 Kohanim. 85 Kohanim. Absolute tragedy. Interestingly, in this verse, Doeg, whose name is usually spelled Daled Vav Aleph Gimel, it's spelled in the text. Not we still read it the same way, but if you look in the proper scroll, it's spelled Daled Vav Yud Gimel, which has the word in the middle of it, Vai, like we say Oy Vey. Vey means like woe, W-O-E. Woe to Doeg with this action of slandering Achimelech and literally killing Achimelech, not just killing him with his tongue with a bad report which got the decree upon him. He also with his own hands killed 85 Kohanim. Woe to Doeg, he has lost his share in the world to come. That's what Chazal take out of this spelling over here. He has lost his share in the world to come, which means we would think, yeah, okay, he's a bad guy. But we have to appreciate he's the head of a Sanhedrin. He's one of the leaders of Klal Yisrael. He's close to the Tzaddik Shel. With this act of being a slanderous person and committing murder, he has lost his share in the world to come. Yes, Mrs. Fox.
I don't, one man killed all these people, or didn't he have help? Or couldn't they have ganged up against him and stopped him?
Yeah.
They're all.
That's often a question. Couldn't the captives gang up against the captor? They're usually going to outnumber them. But first of all, you have just like innocent Kohanim. They don't even know what hit them. They just came. They were invited from the Mishkan to the king's presence. Didn't know what to expect, and suddenly they're being dragged around. I don't know if they had time to realize they were even under threat. Also, perhaps they had like individuals holding them down. I don't know. Although we saw that the servants of Shaul did not want to do the service, maybe there were like some lower ranked people that were not considered officially the servants of Shaul that were still helping. It's an interesting question, but Doeg himself is the one that executed them. Yeah. So I'll leave you to speculate about how they didn't gang up, but that's what happened. Yeah. Did somebody else say something? Yeah. We'll just wrap it up here. And he struck the entire city from man to woman, child to nursing, infant, the shore v'chamor v'sel lepichar, and the ox and the donkey and the sheep. Not only did he strike those specific Kohanim, but he destroyed the entire city, even their belongings. Now, this is awfully similar to something he should have done, eh? If you recall, Shaul, who right now is completely destroying the city of Nov, he had a very similar command to do something. Yeah, Amalek. Haftorah a few weeks ago. Shaul was meant to do this very same thing to the people of Amalek. And on that occasion, he showed mercy. He left behind the choice of the flock. He left behind Agag, the king. Chazal say, somebody who is merciful in the wrong place will end up being extremely harsh. If you can't control your midot and execute when you're supposed to, you'll end up being an achzar. You'll end up being harsh. We think that Shaul is acting for mercy, but it just shows that he wasn't able to control his midos, to do the will of God. In this case, it actually turned into awful harshness to destroy the entire city of Kohanim to a greater extent than he even destroyed Amalek. One person escaped. The child of Achimelech was Aviatar. He escaped. In the future, he's going to be the Kohen Gadol under David's rule. Vayiged Evyatar LaDavid ki harag Shaul et konei Hashem. Now David, remember, he's not there anymore. David's hiding out in the town of Yehuda, in the territory of Yehuda. So this refugee from Nov goes and tells David. Abiatar informs David what just happened. And now David says to himself, he says, Yadati bayomahu kisham doeg ha'adami ki aged yagid la'Shaul. Anochi saboti b'chol nefesh beit avicha. Remarkable. The reaction of David is to take responsibility. He says, on that day that I went and got food and a weapon from Nov, I knew that Doeg was there and I should have been more careful. I spoke before Doeg and I knew that there was some chance that he was going to speak Lashon Hara, and it's my fault. I am responsible for every life of your father's house. You see here again, David HaMelech, the tremendously humble David HaMelech, who, even though this was like maybe a minor infraction, was taking complete responsibility for every life that was lost. And from here we're learning that when a person speaks, be extremely, extremely careful. Maybe this could potentially lead to something negative. I'm asking the Kohen for a loaf of bread. I have to be careful who's listening. Be extremely careful when sharing information and with whom and how, which is such a pertinent message in the age of group chats, when we have plenty of opportunity and to post publicly about people and around people. We have to be so cautious about the outcome of our words. Yes, be good, do good, and have a wonderful night. Yes, that brings us to the end of the chapter. And God willing, we'll pick up next week from chapter 23.
All right. So,
Yeshua. Thanks for bearing with my tech issues tonight. And I'll see you next.
Thank you. Yeah.
Bye.